Hello, I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and today I'm taking a long trip connecting to Sydney, Australia, with a brilliant author, John Blick. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Effie. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thanks for the invitation.
So John Blick is an author. His book, Digital Twins, the next revolution of financial services that will disrupt financial services. How exactly is the subtitle?
Oh, so it's actually a very long title. It's Digital Twins, the next human revolution that will disrupt the financial services industry.
Wow. Your book was published last year. I guess you'll be celebrating 1 year. When is it? Next month?
Yes, that's correct. Next month, it will be a year of publication.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, John is also spearheading innovation at NAB, the National Australia Bank. I understand from our offline discussion that NAB is the second largest bank in Australia. Here we are today to discuss your forward thinking, I must say, because, okay, today everything's hot around avatars and the metaverse and NFTs and all that, digital world. But since your book was published a year ago, I imagine you started thinking or writing at least three years ago. So you were and you remain ahead of the time. So tell us a little bit about how you started thinking about what you've written in the book, and then we'll take a tour about the concepts and the main ideas that your narrative has developed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I actually started thinking about this about 5 years ago, but only started writing over a year ago. And where everything started, it started in studying a concept of a shift in value from physical assets to digital assets. So at the time I was working for a very large insurer here in Australia. And when you think about the reason why insurance and banks exist, they exist because people want to own and they value physical assets. Now, if you shift this assumption from people are going to own and value a physical asset like a house or a vehicle, and replace that by people are going to own and value digital assets, the entire value chain collapses. The entire value chains of a bank or an insurance company collapses, and you have to completely reinvent your business models, and you completely have to reinvent your entire value chain. So at the time, we were really digging into what are digital assets, and our thinking took us through how do we, in a world where people are actually replicating themselves, how does that work for a bank? How do we connect with our customers? We need to completely rethink the notion of values, and we need to completely rethink the way our products and services are constructed, and how do we reach those new customers. And that was, so we went very, very broad in exploration. We started trying to understand what is this emerging thing called blockchain? What is the potential of artificial intelligence? What is the potential of machine learning? And we went out there to talk to a lot of different startups and tech companies to start make sense of that potential new world, having that key hypothesis that in the future, people will value digital assets. So we started creating that idea, and that what actually resonated the most with me. If I can replicate myself, if I can replicate who I am, that will become the most valuable asset I will ever own, because that digital version of me is going to represent me in the digital world and transact on my behalf and generate value on my behalf on the digital world. So that was the beginning of this journey, and I had no idea what I was going to find out. That what we found out, and we can discuss this in more depth, if is that it's actually not science fiction, and the state of technology is already there to enable this to happen. So that's how things started.
Very interesting. So, I mean, I can only relate to, I remember, I started blogging around Fintech in early 2015. And the first time I sort of had a serious thought about digital assets was not cryptocurrencies. It was about the idea that our credit rating is our credit sort of worthiness, not our credit rating, our credit worthiness or our reputation is going to be a serious digital asset.
Yes.
It needs to be managed. We need to, apply the basic concepts of compounding, of leveraging, all the basic concepts that we know, but in a completely different way. And also the concept that a lot of intangible assets that we already value in our life, but are not monetizable or quantifiable, they're going to become valuable, especially in social interactions. We haven't seen that yet, but as you said, the technology is there, we can understand it. But if we go to financial services, John, I mean, most people think of digital twins or digital, representation as chat bots, things like that. Tell us how you think about it, because clearly it's beyond that, your thinking. And when we think of digital twins, what are you referring to? Is it like, okay, Effie, her digital twin, what aspects?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're saying multiple aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's get there. But at some point, I would like to go back on what you said around digital reputation, because it is absolutely fascinating. And I agree with you. Digital reputation will be a key attribute of our digital twins to actually interact. That will be the proxy for trust in the digital economy and potentially in the metaverse. But we can go there after that. So let's start with what is a digital twin and where did it start? So a digital twin is a digital replica of a physical asset. Originally, that's what it is. I'll give you an example. When you operate and when you build heavy assets, such as a nuclear plant or a plane or a manufacturer, you want to have a virtual model of that asset to understand how does this asset perform under certain conditions. For instance, you can predict failure. And if you can predict failure, then you can start better maintaining this asset so it actually doesn't fail in the real life. The last thing you want is to stop a nuclear plant during production to replace a missing part. So that's actually where it started, and it started about 30 years ago. But very surely and quickly, it's moving from that heavy industry world into closer to our day-to-day reality as individuals, as customers of large organizations like banks and insurance company. Where there's use cases where you can create a digital expert. So chatbots are very early version, but kind of dumb versions of digital twins in the world of services. You can actually start replicating human expertise. And with AI, machine learning, you can start creating models, which are mental models of how to answer certain questions, but that's very transactional. Newer technology enables to create exact replicas of how you look and how you behave and can replicate your emotions. There's a fantastic company based out of New Zealand, which does exactly that. They create a digital replica of you. It looks like you. It's available on the screen. You know that it's not a human, but it very much looks like a human. And the beauty of their technology is that the thing that looks like a human on the screen will ask you questions or will answer your question in a very rational way. But through the camera, it's actually picking up the micro expression of your face, and it adjusts the answer to your immediate emotional state by sending you visual cues. So if you look confused, the machine will look slightly confused. If you smile, the machine will slightly smile, because 80% of the communication is actually nonverbal. So what's fascinating is that they have the intelligence and the replication of knowledge to answer very specific questions, but also adjusted to your emotional state, which is fascinating. So that's a use case of customer interaction where you can use a digital twin, and those twins become brand ambassadors. So it's technology which is used by companies like Mercedes. NatWest was one of the first early adopter in UK, and there's other large organizations in Australia which are using these kind of technologies. Now that's when it comes to consumer facing. You can go even deeper and with many use cases. There's a fantastic company called Merlin AI. And what Merlin does is they replicate your knowledge. And they do that, it's a technology which is called tacit knowledge automation. They don't need data. They don't need an algorithm. They basically ask you some questions and they create a mental map so that they can replicate your expertise very quickly. So when you think about it, it's absolutely fascinating because you are the byproduct of your experience, your knowledge, your emotion, and all of that can be digitized. So that's the ultimate digital twin, because what it enables to do is it enables a company to digitize subject matter expertise. There's great use cases in the space of KYC, anti-money laundering, in financial crime, where there's a shortage of experts around the world, and you can actually replicate that human expertise and scale it digitally. And the expert is also has a vested interest in that to be successful because they can be remunerated for their expertise on digital platforms. So that's the next stage of the evolution of a digital twin. If you think about artificial intelligence, visual interfaces such as what Soul Machine does, and tacit knowledge automation such as what Merlin AI does, you have the full package to replicate Effie and have the Effie avatar selling our expertise on the digital economy. And the repercussions for banks are absolutely huge. because let's assume that today, through your direct employment, you are making $50,000 a year through one source. Tomorrow, if you can create a digital FE, you can replicate this exact $50,000 a year through thousands of interactions across the world 24/7. Now, the repercussions for banks are huge because from understanding your risk profile is very different. How do we know that FE is still credit worthy when we cannot trace the multiple source of income that she's generating, but we're still talking about the exact same number? So we have to completely rethink the way we understand risk, the way we understand our customers, but also the way we interact with them. How do we interact with the digital FE? How do we, if digital FE is not making decision based on emotions, like for banks and insurance company, most of the communication is also based on emotion. How do you relate to money? How do you relate to security? So if we start interacting with the digital FE, which is not driven by those psychological cues, we have to completely rethink this.
Wow,
It was
amazing.
a very long answer to a very simple question, FE, sorry.
Oh my God. I mean, I didn't miss one word from what you said. This is just amazing. What I've been thinking as I hear you, John, is if we take a simple case, you know very well in the fintech world, the robo-advisory trend and where we are at today, right? Which is really still a very hybrid model that is needed. And we're still at the stage where we haven't made the shift from product selling in the investment world. And this is really an example that everybody can understand, right? That has some savings, wants to invest, and is going to use some hybrid model. So we haven't made the shift from product to what I would call human-centric, where basically it's all about the advisory rather than making fees on the product, because we've basically commoditized all these products. So how can we imagine in that context the digital twins? Is it like I would train my digital twin in that aspect to understand my goals in life, and therefore, what investments could make sense, and that the digital twin would protect me from the emotional thing of selling when I shouldn't be selling, or whatever, all that. Is that how we should think about it?
So the way you can potentially think about it is what digital twins enable you to do is to create your digital intellectual property. That's what it comes down to. And your digital intellectual property is limited to what you know. Now, in the digital world, nothing stops us from thinking that one module of knowledge that I don't have is around trading. But turns out that UFE, you do have that module of knowledge. So and I do have a module of knowledge which is in innovation management and strategy, and you don't have that one. So nothing stops us from isolating that module and trading that module so that we can both enhance our digital twins. So in that world, let's assume that I acquire against a fee, I acquire your knowledge around trading, and I enhance my digital twin with that module. So what the digital twin is going to do, it's going to, because it's replicating who I am, it's going to know my risk profile, know my risk appetite, know my goals, my saving, my long-term goals, all of that. And it's going to reinforce this with your knowledge around trading. And then it's going to go on a platform and trade using all that information and completely removing emotions out of trading. I am really bad at trading, really, really bad. But if you're really good, then I can enhance myself. So I can see a world where this is happening, where we trade our different IP knowledge or our IP modules to enhance ourselves.
So in a way, it's like my digital twin can choose to team up with your digital twin or other digital twins, depending on what is needed. We can create, I don't know if we should call it a portfolio or a community or what this needs to be called. It's a collaboration, or is it it's a digital collaboration, right? A smart collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you can plug that in with your concept of digital reputation. How good do you know, how good am I in what am I doing? How do you know that John is the right business partner for you in the innovation module? Or how do I know that Effie is the right partner for me when it comes to trading? But if you have interacted on the metaverse or on any digital economy platform with thousands of people over the world and across the years, you will receive some rating, and your star rating system will become a proxy for me to understand how good you are at what you do. And therefore, I'm going to go to you for that specific skills that you do have.
So do you see financial services banks, let's call them banks, financial service providers as risk managers of these digital twins in their lives? And I'm not talking, when I say their lives, I'm not talking about, the income they can generate, but really about their lives. These are assets that, of course, are revenue generating. How do you see financial services there? Because obviously it's not the old way, like they're not going to just open an account and in a bank suddenly, instead of having, we are 7 trillion, that there's going to be 70 trillion, people. How do you think of this?
It's a fundamental question that every bank and insurer should ask themselves. Okay. Because I think we are at the pivotal point in time where those institutions needs to think about their future very seriously, but also the future of their customers. Let's just use an example and to try to illustrate your question, Effie. I did buy an apartment in Paris in 2009. And if I were to sell that property today, I would probably make 25 or 30% capital gain. And that's a physical asset that all insurers and all banks in the world understand. They can help me finance this, they can help me insure this, they can help me refinance this. Now, in 2009, if I had been smart, and if I had invested 100 euros in Bitcoin, I would be a billionaire today. So now let's just assume that I hold those two different asset classes. One is completely commoditized. That's my property. Everyone can service this. The other one, which is my digital wallet, where the real value is, no one can service that. There's no insurers in the world, as far as I know, which can propose me products to protect that asset. And there's no bank in the world which can help me refinance that asset or take equity out of that asset and put it in the physical world. So where I see banks, what I'm trying to illustrate is that there's a fundamental shift in customer behavior, in customer expectation, and where value is and will be. It's more likely to become to shift to the digital world. Digital twins are a digital emerging asset class. So where it could play out for banks and insurers, and that's a decision for them to make, is unless they do understand this emerging digital world, and unless they do understand why customers are going there, they will not be relevant. So they have to run their research. They have to understand why people are seeing value here. And maybe it's as simple as physical assets are no longer relevant or no longer affordable, and therefore people are shifting to digital assets. That's for them to make a decision and make research. Going back to your question around how can banks and insurers operate in a world where we all digitize ourselves, there's multiple ways they can do this. One way could be, let's develop mechanisms of transfer of value between those digital assets or those digital avatars. Let's ensure the reputation of those avatars. I'm an insurer, and I'm going to ensure the trustworthiness of the FE's digital twin. As a bank, I am going to be the custodian of the digital intellectual property of FE, and that will become a new digital vault. I'm going to help FE find and match other IP modules that she's lacking. And as a bank, I'm going to do my intermediation job. I'm going to help FE transfer digital money from physical money and make that link between the digital world and the physical world. I think all of that is up for grab. It's still it's an emerging world. If we think about the metaverse, like a year ago, no one was talking about it. Then Facebook made the announcement that they are centering their business model around the metaverse and investing $180 billion over the next 10 years to make this happen. And now everyone's talking about the metaverse. But the question for banks is absolutely fundamental. Unless they start understanding this emerging world, tech companies who excel at customer experience and understanding where customers are and where they will be, they will actually bridge that gap that banks will not be able to provide with relevant services and products. Reversing, the question is, how do banks adapt their processes? How do they adapt their management? How do they adapt their people to be relevant into that world? If you think about, there was recent announcement about JP Morgan and Siam Commercial Bank opening up branches on the metaverse. Like, think about this at scale. You are a bank and you have digital employees on the metaverse. And those digital employees can be pure avatars or can be digital humans or humans on shift in the metaverse. How do you manage those resources? How do you manage a workforce which is composed of humans, hybrids, digital humans, and digital twins? What are the secret sauce? What is the recipe of successful management in a world like this? How does a machine override a human decision? Will a human decision always have the last word against the machine? And knowing that the machine is way more knowledgeable than the human. How do you start making the shift from human conversation to machine conversation? All of this is completely up for grab. So there's a lot of education that needs to be happening in the next few years. And again, I
hadn't thought of that.
Very...
And the same holds for the customers, right? I mean, you'll have these hybrid combinations of You know, I might be going as Effie, the physical, you know, through whatever Decentraland, but I might be sending my digital twin. I might, you know, amazing. It's just
there's an even more, I think there's an even more pressing question for banks and insurance companies. Physical people are not turning up into branches anymore. Why would they turn up in a virtual branch on the metaverse? Why? So you have to understand that shift, and you have to understand how you engage with your customers in the real world, but also in the digital world. I think that's a way more pressing issue than trying to understand how to create the right level of products and services in the metaverse.
wow. I was thinking, you know, before, as I was preparing to speak to you, to ask you the question, how does, you know, the fact that my son, who's 19, you know, obviously plays all these video games and has all these assets in the form of skins, right?
Yeah.
How does that world relate to, you know, I think of digital assets as my cryptocurrency portfolio, and you know, there's no bridge between those two worlds.
That's true.
And I know that a lot of people discuss about the fact that there are gamers that really own a lot of these skins, so to speak, and there's no way to leverage those assets. Those assets are idle. They're like, you know, I think of them as um, in a treasure chest, an asset that nobody yet values except, you know, a small community that is growing and economic activity and so on. So I assume that that is also something that banks have to understand. Are you seeing this, thinking that really the entry point for them is the mature market of gaming to understand what's going on, or not, because gamers are a specific class of people?
Yeah. It's very interesting, and I think your example is bang on, because that again illustrates the rise of digital assets, and people value digital assets, and you don't know why. Like I've no idea why people would value a digital Gucci handbag or a skin for their avatar. It's beyond me, but there's value for them, and they are the customer of today and the customer of tomorrow. So banks and insurers need to understand this. I think what you're mentioning is a key example where banks, and I think banks are starting to explore that space, and that the space of custodianship. BNY Mellon is one of the early mover in that space, trying to position themselves as custody for all those digital assets. So
Are they, John? I didn't know that. You
yeah.
mean beyond cryptocurrencies? They're looking to custody skins,
Well,
so to speak.
So sorry, that's not a statement. That's an educated guess, because if you actually start positioning yourself as custodian, place for custodianship for crypto, then the next logical extension is for those digital assets. So the question is, how do you then reach to that audience of gamers? But I really think that it's a space that banks should start considering very seriously, as well as the space of tokenization. How do you help your customer tokenize their assets?
I don't know if you're aware, John, of Backed. Yeah, that's publicly traded. They're sort of an offspring of the IC exchange, and I remember when they first launched, they launched this wallet that you can put in not only crypto and reward points, but in-app game tokens. And I was like, okay, this is where we are going. And we should have one wallet that we can seamlessly eventually swap and have everything there and swap between whatever fiat,
Yeah.
crypto, asset-backed tokens, or skins and whatever else
Or your
is
digital
out
IP,
there.
or the modules of your digital twins IP. But I absolutely agree. I think we're moving into a world where we all have our digital identity, and our digital identity will be our proxy to get access to our digital our digital wallet. And again, we should create links between fiat, crypto, NFTs, and any form of digital asset which is valued at some point, converted into fiat.
How do you see the digital identity big puzzle and need, if you want? How does that relate to digital twins? Because the way you've described the digital twins, maybe, do I understand correctly, I could have multiple digital twins, like segregating my, we all live many lives, right? Right at the same time, or
Yep.
over time and so on. Is that how you think will go, or will it be one Effie like, John like avatar that has everything in it uploaded?
Actually, that's a fascinating question, because it relates to identity, and identity morphs over time, and identity differs from who you're speaking to. So the way I'm thinking about this, going back to your question of will we have one digital twin or many digital twins? I think the answer is I will create some filters and have purpose-driven digital twin. One digital twin for revenue generation, so mostly work, will be John's intellectual IP, John expertise, John experiences, enhanced with trading modules from FE, from whoever, and that will be my revenue generation digital twin. That will be there. And that's the one I want to protect. And the identity that will power this digital twin is my identity as an employee. I'm John. This is my proof of my physical ID. This is a proof of my career experience, of my education, of all the grades I received, and so on and so on. Money generation digital twin. And then there will be the social John. I'm being asked to speak at a conference which I cannot physically attend or cannot virtually attend. I will send my digital twin. And this digital twin will be a mix of professional John and social John. I think it's going to be, we'll have a filter and we'll decide which twin or which modules the digital twin was going to represent us for a very specific purpose. Which modules does this digital twin needs to get access to?
Wow, fascinating. John, I have to ask you, is Soul Machines already preparing your digital twin? Can we see your digital twin? I mean, if anybody gets in line first, that should be you.
Well, so let me tell you this, Effie, we've never physically met. So you have no idea who you're talking to. Are you talking to physical John, or are you talking to his digital
I
John?
was going to ask you, actually. I was going to ask you how, teach me how to know whether you are John with, the flesh or not. Because, how would I know?
Yeah. So I think the answer for now is pretty simple, and you can pick that there's no lag in our communication, despite the distance. There's no lag. You can see many micro expressions on my face. The tone of my voice differ. I've been moving position many times during this conversation, so you can probably pick that you're talking to a real human. That might not be true in 5 years. And we may very seriously ask ourselves in the future, am I talking to a human or am I talking to a digital twin? And we also, what needs to be very clear, and I think it's an ethic question, is every time a corporation or an individual will be engaging with someone else, we should disclose if it is a human, if it is a digital human, or if it is a machine. I think that's an ethical question.
Clearly. You reminded me that in, this was 2017, I met with Sophia the robot at a conference. And I was behind the scenes because I know Ben Goetzel, and you know, we had this, you know, he was opening 2 suitcases and, you know, assembling Sophia the robot in front of my eyes, and then dressing her up on stage, and then some questions. And I do remember this characteristic delay in answering. And of course, you know, the expression of the face was not there yet, but you could see that this is just a technological issue, and we are going we are going there. And I could see that you can amplify a narrative through these robots. I mean, I wish, you know, if I want to pass a message as an influencer, that I could do it 50 times a day versus, you know, I can physically do it once a day, right? How many interviews can I do and discuss per day? After our discussion, I would love to hear from you who else I should talk to learn more, but I have limited time and limited capacity, but my digital twin wouldn't, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a way
Amazing.
to augment yourself. And I think the most interesting thing is actually a societal question we need to ask ourselves. If every one of us has the power to digitize itself and create a professional version of us, which is going to generate revenue, so we are free from employment, right? Fundamentally, what are we going to do with our time? What if you were to have all the time in the world? What would you do? Would you spend your time working in charity? Would you spend your time working in education? Would you live a life of leisure? Would you do a mix of all this? Digital twins, I think, are a way to augment ourselves. It's also a way to augment the world itself. And what I mean by this is, with that technology, we could replicate the greatest mind who actually ever walked this earth. We could replicate the knowledge of people like Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi. We could replicate the knowledge of Albert Einstein, and we could have them teaming up with modern technologies and modern science and modern experts to solve the world problem. I think that's also one of the power of digital twins. But there's also another major risk which is associated with this is, are we going to create even more segregation based on technology? Because when you think about it,
increased digital divide, you mean?
Absolutely, absolutely, because it's highly relevant for me because I do not produce anything material. I'm employed and I'm employable because of my experience, the way I think, and the way I think translate into projects, which translate into action, which translate into revenue, measurable outcome at some point. But if I'm a laborer, I'm completely outcasted from that kind of technology. Or if I were born in a country, if I had not been lucky to be born in France, have an education, create a career, this kind of technology would actually amplify the discrimination. And I think that's serious concerns because it's coming. It's actually already there and it's coming. So the question for us is, how do we also think about this in the lens of, let's use this technology for a better world. Let's not use this technology for more segregation, or let's not use this technology for, replicate workforce and fire them all. We need to find the right balance.
Yeah, but there's also the question of, you have an IP today that you developed, in sort of the old world, right?
Yeah.
But what if you were born in this new world where digital twins are possible and all this hybrid and so on? How would you educate yourself? And
Absolutely.
there's so many questions.
Absolutely.
John, I mean, we can be talking for hours. Before we close, and of course, I will share with our listeners the links to your books and where they can find you and so on. Can I ask you what you're reading and how you sort of, continue to think about these issues? I guess, your work and so on. But what are you reading?
Okay, so I'm reading a lot, about a book a week, on any kind of topics. Because at the core of the innovation practice, you have to be multidisciplinary. So you have to be interested in economics, you have to be interested in climate, you have to be interested in science, you have to be interested in psychology and technology, and so on and so on. So I try to discipline myself to read books on those very different topics and try to then make sense of it so that it informs my work. At the moment, I'm extremely interested in how might bank play more than their part in the war against climate change. So I've been doing a lot of research in that space over the past few months. But the current book I'm reading is a book called Values from Mark Carney, who was the governor of the Bank of England.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating read. Highly recommended.
Thank you so much, John, and hope to talk to you soon and keep us informed on what's going on digital twins and financial services.
With pleasure. Thanks very much, Effie.